Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined today as usual by my non-PS5 having co-host Tucker Hazel,
That's
and we're
me,
here
everyone. Thank
today
you. Thank you.
to first celebrate Tucker, of course.
Oh,
Happy
thank you. Thank you. I deserve it.
Congratulations for being here, Tucker. It's a big honor to be in your presence. But it's also a big honor to be here reviewing 2021 through the lens of PlayStation today. We'll be doing it for all three platforms, but today is all about Sony. So
Yes.
if you want to share your thoughts on PlayStation's year or anything else at all, be sure to join our Discord link as usual. Top of the description only down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell,
Ring a
and
ding dong, that MF bell.
leave a comment. Who knows? Fuck it. You know?
It's a crazy goddamn year.
But Tucker, I think we ought to start this conversation with a little bit of a recap of
Okay.
some important just PlayStation moments to sort of set the framework for the conversation, if you will.
Sure. I'll allow it.
Now, do you want to take this, or do you want me to shoot from the hip with some knowledge for you?
It sounds like you've got more knowledge up in that
Sure.
crazy big brain of yours.
I think I'll just throw out some important games, some big news bullet points, and then we'll kind of take it wherever we want to.
Sure.
So this year, PlayStation had a couple of pretty major exclusives.
Mm-hmm.
We had Returnal, we had Ratchet and Clank, we had Deathloop, and then we had some other tiers of exclusives below that. Your Kanas down to your Destruction All Stars and your ports of Deathloop. Sorry, of Death Stranding and of Ghost of Tsushima. But that was basically that. Not a huge, breadth of exclusives this year, but some very high profile ones.
Mm-hmm.
We had news stories of varying, quality, right? We had the quite exciting announcement of PSVR 2 with a lot of details about that. But by the other token, we had a lot of things like the great PSN shutdown scare that happened not once but twice this year. And then we've had plenty of leaks and rumors out of the company, such as the upcoming Spartacus service. It's been quite a busy year for PlayStation, in spite of the fact that again they skipped E3, had a couple interesting showcases, had a
Mm-hmm.
couple underwhelming showcases, especially towards the end of the year. Although we did get some pretty big announcements there, some Insomniac games. We got some delays. Horizon, God of War pushed out of this year, so
Mm-hmm.
it was busy for better and for worse. They completely smashed Xbox in terms of sales this year. PlayStation 5, in spite of its sales constraints, is outselling PS4 at this point in the machine's comparative life cycles.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tucker, what did you think of PlayStation's 2021?
So the one word that was really interesting in what you just said, and all of that was great ground level information, set us up, is you called it busy. And I think that's the word I would use to not describe this year.
Sure.
Personally, when I'm thinking about what PlayStation did in 2021 as compared to the launch of the PS5 and the end of the life cycle of the PS4, this year is the not busy one. This is the year where we have to kind of scramble for exclusives. This is the year where, they released some big things, but not really in comparison to what they have in previous years. I mean, and especially in this second half of the year when it was, as I think we'll want to get into, Deathloop, made by an Xbox studio. And this is sort of the year I think of a slow start to the PS5. I think we got off to a great start initially, those first 5 months of the PS5, which was the launch leading into Returnal and Ratchet. That's a great start. But when you don't have any first party heavy hitters or exclusives going to the rest of the year, I think this was pretty weak. And also, I feel like this is the year that while they are handily winning sales wise over Xbox, this is the year of them losing ground to Xbox. This is the year of one of their biggest exclusives being made by Xbox, of MLB The Show going on Game Pass, of Xbox Game Pass taking over the conversation in terms of console space. So I don't know. I'm pretty down on Sony this year. I don't think it was terrible. Was pleased with the games that I played, but this does not have the momentum or energy or general quality or quantity of any of the last years of PlayStation.
Yeah, no, I agree with you pretty much completely. I thought this was a poor year for Sony, especially for me personally. I don't think other than Returnal, which I think is a fantastic game that just was not a fantastic game for me, I really was not impressed by anything I played on PlayStation this year.
Yeah.
The only PlayStation exclusive I finished this year was Kena, and that's only because I had to review it for work.
Mhm.
If I wasn't reviewing it for work, I wouldn't be in that game.
Yeah.
I think that they released some interesting titles. I know you're a huge Ratchet and Clank fan. The game is undoubtedly of a very high quality,
Mhm.
but it felt like we were either traveling in familiar ground, whether because it was through definitive editions of games that literally just released,
Yes, which
or
is another weird thing.
yeah, or if it was because the games to me just felt half baked in some respects. Even
Sure.
Returnal backfilled a lot of important content with that 2.0 update.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just felt like Sony was really scrambling this year.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that is compounded by the fact, as you're saying, that Microsoft was really coming up this year. And I think we felt that most in the holiday season,
Yes.
which was supposed to be the big three gun fight between the three enormous shooters, Vanguard, Battlefield, and Halo.
Yeah.
And
Vanguard and Battlefield released to a fucking shit show of
yes,
gaggle of mess and broken nonsense, and then Halo Infinite was the good one.
yeah, and that it makes Microsoft look good, but it also makes Sony look bad because they don't have it. They're usually Sony can rely on these big AAA titles,
Yeah.
the content exclusivity deals they have with them for whatever, to say, you know what, we don't have an exclusive holiday title, but you're going to want to play Vanguard in 2042 here. But the truth is, no one wants to play Vanguard in 2042 anywhere.
Mhm.
So I think the fact that this was also kind of a soft year for multi-platform AAA games
Mhm.
um, also didn't help Sony, and it kind of left the ecosystem in a weird place to where my favorite game I played on my PS5 this year was Resident Evil 4. You know,
Which that's
GameCube game.
yeah, no, it's interesting is looking back on what I played this year on my PlayStation 5 and 4. I played a good amount of games. I played all of the exclusive games that they put out this year. I tried Returnal. I platinumed Ratchet. I beat
Yeah,
Kena. I beat Deathloop. And now I guess I didn't play Destruction All Stars. My
I played
fucking
Destruction
bad.
All Stars.
Um, you know what? I should just for completionist sake. But um, all those games I thought were good. I don't think there's any of them that are bad. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe you would disagree with that, but I think it was all quality. But I think you're right in that this year also being a little bit weak in terms of third party games means that they don't have that to lean back on. And
yeah,
usually you're able to say, okay, oh, look at these like 3 or 4 tentpole, gigantic, top of the industry titles that Sony Studios are putting out. Okay, we didn't really have that this year. That's okay. It's the beginning of the console's life cycle. But then the third party games are Resident Evil Village at the beginning of the year, and Call of Duty and Battlefield, which came out, underbaked. So yeah, that's an interesting aspect of not necessarily something that Sony did, but
yeah,
them putting themselves in a position to where it feels even weaker because their third party partners weren't bringing the
yeah,
heat. I would say like they usually are. I mean, like even last year was Assassin's Creed Valhalla launching with the system, and well, Watch Dogs Legion, which was kind of mixed, but the Call of Duty game that year was good. The Assassin's Creed game that year was good. Those are all coming out in that holiday season. And Sony had a great 2020. So I think we're
yeah.
also, this year is even more disappointing coming off of 2020, which was a categorical win for Sony. I mean, Nintendo and Microsoft barely did fucking anything. And Sony was just the king of the crop last year. And this year, that's kind of inverted and it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, but I think the thing is like they were never going to be able to sustain what they did in 2020
Yeah,
because
no, of
2020
course.
2020 was outrageous, not only in terms of having a great launch for the PlayStation 5,
Yeah.
but you got to remember we also had Last of Us Part 2, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and Ghost of Tsushima all within what?
And
Like,
Dreams and Iron Man VR.
sorry,
Don't fucking forget it.
all of that content was, even including those, was in what, like 5 months of each other,
Mhm.
6 months of each other. It was really incredible, and that was just the warm up before Miles and Demon Souls and Sackboy and
Mhm.
all those third party games and Astra's Playroom, which is the best out of everything they released last year, and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. So this year
Wait,
was going to
hold
be,
on. They released Last of Us 2 last year.
oh, sorry, better than all of them except for that.
Yeah.
There's only like 3 games that are better than Last of Us Part 2 in existence, and 2 of them are in 64 rail shooters. Um, but so I think they're always gonna have a trouble there. But
Mhm.
they doubly had trouble when we lost Horizon and we lost God of War out of the year,
Yeah.
and even what's it
Gran
called,
Turismo.
Gran Turismo.
Yeah. it'll be interesting to see how this year fares in comparison to future years, because
Yeah,
frankly, we thought that the momentum was just not going to stop when when the PS5 comes out and we have a great launch and we're leading into, okay, wow, next year is going to be Returnal, Ratchet, Horizon, God of War. Like that was what we thought, and that was hopeful.
yeah,
That was overly optimistic, because I mean they hadn't even given a date for God of War, and there was like barely a window for Horizon at that point. But they had given us no indication that it was not going to be true, considering the momentum that they had for the end of the PS5's
sure.
PS4's life cycle. Is no, of course there's going to be 3 or 4 game of the year quality titles from Sony Studios each year. Like that's just a given at this point. They've been doing that for 4 years now. So why would it stop? Why would they stop when they've got their most powerful console ever releasing?
Yeah,
But it's unclear, and I think that's the thing. Is these games are going to come out, obviously, presumably next year for the 3 that we mentioned, and are going to be probably better because of that, having more development time, having more time in the oven. But it does leave a down year for the PS5.
yeah,
And I don't think it's there's no way in fuck it damages the console in the long run. But I do think that what it does, and it's hard to avoid discussing Xbox in our PlayStation year in review, but I think this year gave a window for Xbox to weasel their way in. I mean, I think with content and quality and care, but weasel their way in back into the conversation and take away some of the ground from Sony, because this was a weak year. If this year was Horizon and God of War killing that game of the year conversation, okay, yeah. Oh, I guess they did have Halo Infinite and Psychonauts 2, but we'll push that to the side because these 2 fucking juggernauts are this year. But they
yeah.
didn't have that. So I think ultimately it's a good thing for the industry that they had a weak year in a strange way. And it's also not a huge problem for them because they're still selling their games and their consoles incredibly well.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think this year, I don't think Sony gives a shit
Yeah.
that the year was considered by, I think, most to be weak for
Mhm.
them. Because why would you when you're out selling a competition? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is Xbox's opportunity, but also Xbox is having severe shortages to the point where people playing in the first Halo Infinite esports tournament were playing on dev kit units because they couldn't source enough consoles. So Sony's like, yeah, okay, you beat us. What are you gonna do about it? And the
Mhm.
answer is kind of nothing, because PlayStation's going to keep on selling them. And so then it just trickles down to, where do I sit as somebody whose first console is a PS2 and who has loved Sony as I've grown up and played games my entire life.
Yeah.
It leaves me feeling that I just don't really care about my system. I don't find that they've addressed the sort of hardware level issues I had with the machine yet. I think the UI is still pretty poor. I
Mm.
think that they are clearly being outmaneuvered in terms of services. And so I just find myself limping along from exclusive to exclusive. And in this case, it just didn't quite hit for me the right way. I think Returnal was quite special. And
Mhm.
even though I didn't connect to that one, I think that was the highlight of the year. But no, I think you're right. I think ultimately it doesn't matter. And they are positioning themselves for a very strong 2022.
Hopefully, yeah.
Even if I'm not super sold on Ragnarok personally, and while I was middling on Zero Dawn, I think Forbidden West looks really fucking rad from all
Yeah.
of the gameplay they've been showing. I think that they're going to bounce back pretty quickly, especially since Horizon and Gran Turismo are very close together pretty early in the year.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what else they have, because
yeah,
we're also in a Sony that has a lot of other studios. And I do think the one categorical win for them this year is studio acquisitions. Buying up Housemark and Bluepoint and like 3 or 4 supplementary studios to help on development of their games is a win. They have grown their family, and they've done that through the course of the year. And now they're expanding their horizons even further. We will probably end up getting some other smaller games that next year that will supplement that in a way that this year didn't have.
it's possible. I would like that to be true, but I don't think the acquisitions were especially impressive this year,
Okay.
for the reason that Bluepoint and Housemark, which are pretty much the only 2 like recognizable acquisitions they
Yeah.
made,
Mhm.
already make games for Sony, and that's not going to change.
Sure.
It's
No, that's
it's
a good
the
point. That's a
it's
good
the
point.
equivalent of when Nintendo bought Next Level Games at the beginning of this year. good, but
Yeah.
ultimately the next level games are going to keep making Luigi's Mansion titles and probably Mario Strikers or a new
Mhm.
Punch Out or whatever. That was going to happen regardless of that
Sure.
purchase happening. It was probably defense from Nintendo before somebody else came and swooped them up. And I think it's probably the same here because Sony clearly floated Housemarque a lot of resources to make Returnal what it
Yeah.
was, and that was pre-acquisition.
Mhm.
So it doesn't really matter. I think that
Sure.
Microsoft's acquisitions are obviously a lot bigger,
Yeah.
but ultimately, even when they buy somebody like a Ninja Theory to get Hellblade as an exclusive, Sony did nothing that is on that level.
That's a good
Maybe
point.
Jade Raymond Studio, but they announced that without a logo, without any kind of game. They announced it on the back of her cachet, which is kind of fading because she was just jumped ship from Google Stadia and hasn't really done a whole lot
Mhm.
in the recent years.
Yeah.
It really felt a lot like, oh, Microsoft is announcing a big studio acquisition, so here's like a PlayStation blog post with like maybe a logo for a
Mhm.
porting studio. Like it's important because they're shifting more towards having a focus on PC.
Yeah.
So for their larger business, it's good. But as a player, none of the acquisitions really did anything for me.
No, I think that's a good point. I think what I'm kind of, I said we were hopefully optimistic at the end of last year in a way that wasn't obviously reflected by the
Yeah,
content of this year. But I would say with the downness of this year, I am more optimistic about next year. With
sure.
I think pretty obviously at least the three big games that we mentioned releasing, and
Yeah,
they're also being things that have not been announced yet. We are in a space where we can have Miles Morales announced, within the year of its release and all those sort of things. So I am hopeful that
yeah,
we'll get the year filled out next year in a way that this year just did not have.
yeah. I hope so too. We'll see. I mean, there's certainly plenty of time to announce. I mean, Insomniac's got a couple projects cooking, but those are, I
Yeah.
think Spider-Man 2 is the closer one, that's 2023.
Yes, it is.
And like we've got the KOTOR remake, which I'm very excited for, but the KOTOR remake is not coming for a long time.
Yeah.
So uh, we'll see if they announce more, but ultimately, like I wouldn't be that surprised if we're only shy like one or two announcements of substantive,
Sure.
exclusives. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, that doesn't really raise my hopes too much for next year. Um,
Yeah,
Disappointed in Sony's 2021.
I am too, because even when you look at the larger picture, like the news was not very good for them
Yeah, that's
on the
yes.
whole, because the PSN store stuff, it just sort of communicates this type of PlayStation that is not particularly interested in its own legacy or supporting its development communities or
Mhm.
its legacy fan communities really, and that just doesn't paint an especially strong picture for like the Spartacus service rumors, which
Yeah,
could maybe be a turning point on the services front for Sony next
hopefully.
year, but ultimately,
We don't know yet. There's so
yes,
little information. It's just fucking Jason. What's his fucking name? Jason Schreier.
Momoa.
Uh, just talking about, hey, this is a thing that's probably gonna happen. I was like, okay. But that I think is the one thing I am holding out hope for next year is
Yeah,
that being good, because that could definitely change the zeitgeist, and if it's good, that's going to be a boost that Sony
definitely.
doesn't need, but I think that they would want, considering
Yeah,
that there was no really big wins for them this year. They didn't even win game of the year, which we thought it was going to be Deathloop, but then
yeah,
obviously wasn't. Although It Takes Two is on PS5. Um, so yeah, I'm hopeful for Spartacus. I'm excited for Forbidden West. I'm so excited for Ragnarok, but that's really all we know. There also has been there's been a good amount of communication this year in terms of we've had showcases. I'd say actually most of them weren't very good. The end of the year
I'd
one
agree.
being the only opposite of that, exception to that.
Yeah,
Uh, but also in the moment we were disappointed by that. I think in retrospect that might have been a little overblown. But then also the stuff that they announced is really far in the future stuff. So 2022 is not bright, not clearly bright for Sony.
yeah. And the last piece of the puzzle that I am actually most excited about of all their stuff is PSVR 2.
Okay.
Um, I think PSVR 2 could be quite wonderful, and it's probably the PS. It's the thing in the PS5 ecosystem that excites me the most right now.
Sure.
because I have PSVR 1 and we did a whole BLB episode about it effectively. We talked about how cool it is, but basically the hardware is shit.
Mhm.
Effectively, it is. It's not good hardware, especially as we get further and further away from its launch.
Yeah.
But Sony is saying a lot of really impressive things about how the head tracking works and taking a lot of the amazing features of the DualSense with the controller, which I love, and putting them into the new controllers they showed off, which are far more like Valve like opposed to the fucking PS Move ones we're stuck with on PSVR 1.
Yeah.
So if that ends up really being great and perhaps launching in holiday 2022, I
Hopefully.
think that could give them a really interesting corner of the market because there is no other console VR option. So if that's
Yeah.
priced right, has a good suite of games, I think that could be really good for me personally in terms of getting me back on my PlayStation 5 regularly, which I'm just simply not right now.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I'm gonna be playing Elden Ring on that in 2 months.
I'm gonna be
That,
playing.
that's what's getting my goose at the moment.
I don't think anything's really getting my goose. I have to decide where I'm gonna play Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga.
That's a good point.
That's the decision I have to make. I think it's probably going to be Series X, in all honesty.
Sure.
I kind of want it on Switch. We'll have to see how it runs on Switch, though. That's kind of my big point of consternation right now. Where do I buy Lego Star Wars?
That's all. Bring this up in all three year in review.
I will leave this in in every one of them. I'll ask you to put in the comment section which platform I should play Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga on.
All right. And with that, we're done talking about Sony. Sorry, Sony, you didn't do good. We're not fans here at BLB of your 2021. But you know what? That doesn't mean jack diddly to you. You're making fucking money hand over fist. Big fry like us don't mean diddles. But hopefully the BLB community means diddles to you, Sony. So do better in 2022.
Do better for Abby.
Bye, Shu.